I want to be honest with you about something before we start. Most mindset content is forgettable. Not because the ideas are wrong, some of them are genuinely good, but because they're delivered like fortune cookies. They're punchy, quotable, and gone by Tuesday. You read the book, you highlight the line, you feel something shift, and then life comes back. The argument, the deadline, the 3 a.m. spiral, and the highlight in the book means nothing because the idea never got deep enough to actually change anything. You might see yourself feel this way. You're still reacting the same way. You're still choosing the same kind of people. You're still telling yourself the same stories about why things aren't working. The mindsets I'm going to share with you today are actually going to shift something and change something for you for real. They're the ones that when they finally landed, really landed in the body, not just in the head, changed something that stayed changed. Changed how I see a difficult conversation, changed how I move through failure, changed how I love people. There are 7 of them, and I'm going to give you them straight, with the science, with the wisdom traditions behind them, and with the stories from my own life, and with the specific way you can use each one immediately. Not next month, not when things calm down, immediately. Let's get started. Mindset 1. Pain is a postcard, not a permanent address. The first mindset that changed my life sounds almost insultingly simple when I say it out loud, but I need you to hear what's underneath. Pain is a postcard, not a permanent address. Here's what I mean. When I was at my lowest, when the career I thought I wanted had fallen apart, when I had moved back home after failing at the monastery in a way that felt permanent, when I was surrounded by people who had expected more from me and I had expected more from myself, I made a mistake that I think almost everyone makes when things go badly. I moved in. Not literally, mentally. I took the painful chapter and turned it into my identity. I stopped treating it like something that was happening and started treating it like something that was true. Like the failure wasn't something I'd been through, like it was something I was. And here's what the neuroscience says about that distinction. Because it's not just poetic, it's biological. The psychologist Martin Seligman spent decades studying what he called explanatory style, the way people explain bad events to themselves. And he found that when people experience setbacks, they tend to explain them in one of 2 fundamentally different ways. Some people explain setbacks as temporary, specific, and external. This happened in this situation for these reasons. Others explain them as permanent, pervasive, and personal. This is who I am. This is what always happens. This is what I can always expect. The first group recovers faster, more completely, and often stronger than before. The second group gets stuck, not because they're weaker, because they moved into the pain and started decorating. The Vedic tradition has a concept that maps onto this perfectly. Anitya, the Sanskrit word for impermanence. Nothing is permanent. Not the good and not the bad. The ancient teachers weren't saying this to comfort you. They were saying it as a precise description of reality. Everything passes. Everything, including this. The postcard mindset is this. When pain arrives, and it will, it always does, you read the postcard, you sit with it, you feel it fully because unfelt pain doesn't leave, it just goes underground. But you do not unpack your bags, you do not redecorate, you do not forward your mail. You are a visitor in this moment, not a resident. This too shall pass. Here's how you apply this immediately. The next time something painful arrives, a rejection, a failure, a loss, a conversation that goes badly, ask yourself one question before you do anything else. Am I feeling this or am I becoming it? Feeling it is healthy, necessary, human. Becoming it is the decision, often unconscious, always costly, to let a moment define you instead of shape you. You are allowed to feel everything. You are not required to become it. Pain is a postcard. Read it, learn from it, then put it down. Mindset 2. You are not your thoughts. You are what you do with them. This one took me years to actually understand. You may have heard it before, but I don't just want you to understand it intellectually. I understood the theory almost immediately, but to actually understand it in the way that changes behavior. Here's the version I was living before this mindset. I believed that because I thought something, it meant something. That because a thought arrived, you're not good enough. They don't really respect you. This is never going to work. It was delivering truth. I was taking delivery of every thought like it was a certified letter from reality. I was wrong. And it was costing me everything. The cognitive psychologist Aaron Beck, the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most evidence-based psychological frameworks we have, identified something he called automatic thoughts. Rapid, reflexive mental commentary that runs continuously below the level of deliberate thinking. And he found that in people experiencing depression, anxiety, and relational difficulties, these automatic thoughts shared consistent characteristics. They were distorted, they were negative, they were experienced as unquestionable truth. The thought arrives, it feels true, therefore it is true. Beck's entire therapeutic revolution was built on one insight. The thought is not the truth. The thought is a hypothesis, and like any hypothesis, it can be tested. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Here's the immediate application. It's 3 words, and I want you to use them every time a thought arrives that feels like an indictment. Is this true? Not is this possible? Not could this be true? Is this actually, demonstrably, evidentially true? And if you can't answer with concrete evidence, if the thought is a feeling dressed as a fact, you are not required to take delivery. You are not your thoughts. You are what you do with them. And what you do with them starts with the radical act of questioning whether they deserve your belief. Mindset 3. This is a rough one. The people who trigger you the most are your greatest teachers. I hate this one. It hurts me. It pains me. It worries me. I'm like, God, do I have to learn it that way? And I need to be careful with this one because it can be misunderstood in a way that causes genuine harm. I'm not saying the people who hurt you deserve a medal. Just to be clear, I'm not saying abuse is a lesson you should be grateful for. I'm not saying that toxic behavior is secretly your spiritual curriculum. What I am saying is something more specific and more useful than that. The emotional reactions that hit hardest, the ones that seem disproportionate, the ones that linger longer than make sense, the ones that make you behave in ways you don't recognize as yourself, are almost never fully about the present moment. They are signals, and the person who triggered the signal is pointing, without knowing it, at something that was already there. Here's the psychology behind this. The concept is called transference, first identified by Freud, but significantly developed and validated by modern relational therapists. Transference is the unconscious redirection of feelings from a past relationship onto a present one. When someone in your life provokes a reaction that feels too big, too intense, too immediate, too hard to let go of, it is frequently because they have activated a wound that predates them entirely. The partner who dismisses your feelings isn't just a dismissive partner. They are also, for your nervous system, every person who ever dismissed you. The parent who didn't have the emotional bandwidth, the teacher who made you feel stupid, the friend who chose someone else. The reaction you're having right now is the sum of all those reactions, which means the most triggering people in your life are giving you a map to the places that still need your attention, a map to the wounds that haven't yet healed, a map to the patterns that keep repeating, not because you're broken, but because the nervous system keeps seeking resolution for what was never resolved. The Jungian concept of the shadow is essential here. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the parts of themselves they've disowned, suppressed, or refused to acknowledge. And he observed that what he most disliked in others is frequently what he most refused to see in himself. The person who infuriates you with their arrogance, do you have arrogance you've been trained to suppress? The person whose neediness exhausts you, do you have needs you've convinced yourself not to have? The person whose anger frightens you, do you have anger you've never allowed yourself to feel? This is not accusation. This is cartography. You're mapping yourself through your reactions. Here's how to use this sensitively. The next time someone triggers you, and I mean really triggers you, the disproportionate reaction, the one you can't shake, instead of asking, why are they like this? Ask two different questions. First, what specifically is being activated in me right now? Not what did they do, what got activated. Name the feeling as precisely as you can. Second, where have I felt this before? Not in this relationship, earlier, younger, way back when. When was the first time you felt this particular flavor of hurt? The answer to that second question is not the person in front of you. And when you know that, when you can see that trigger is a door to something much older, you stop trying to solve the present moment and start attending to the actual source. That is where the real healing is. And the most aggravating person in your life is often the one holding the door open. Big news, Junie just launched at Kroger and we're celebrating with a free can for you. Because most of us hit that point in the afternoon when our energy dips and our focus starts to fade. Well, that's exactly why we created Junie, a sparkling drink crafted with natural ingredients to lift your mood, sharpen your focus, and give you smooth energy, all without the crash. Now available at Kroger stores, including Ralph's, Fred Meyer, King Soopers, Smith's, and Fry's, where you can grab a free Junie on us. So head to drinkjunie.com/Kroger to claim your free can in store so you can feel better and live better. Mindset number 4, clarity is not found, it's built through action. This is for anyone who's waiting for the sign, waiting to feel ready, waiting for the path to become clear. Take the first step. I have to tell you something that I wish someone told me 10 years earlier. The clarity is not coming before the action. The clarity is the product of the action. You do not think your way to a clear life. You live your way to a clear life. The path doesn't become clear by just looking. The path becomes clear by putting one foot in front of the other, and then it appears. Here's the science. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, whose work on flow states we've referenced before, found that people most commonly experience their deepest sense of purpose and meaning not in moments of reflection, but in moments of engaged activity. Not when they're thinking about what they want to do, but when they're doing it. This maps directly onto what neuroscience now knows about how the brain generates meaning. Meaning is not a conclusion the brain reaches after sufficient contemplation. It is a byproduct of engagement, of doing, creating, building, moving. The brain makes meaning retrospectively, from the raw material of lived experience. You cannot think yourself into a meaningful life. You have to live yourself into one. The ancient Sanskrit concept of karma is entirely misunderstood in Western culture. We think of karma as cosmic justice. What goes around comes around. And there's truth to that, but in its original philosophical context, karma simply means action. Karma is the act itself, and the Bhagavad Gita is perhaps the world's most sophisticated treatise on action, specifically on the relationship between action, identity, and liberation. Krishna's central teaching to Arjuna in the Gita is not figure out your purpose and then act. It is act without attachment to the outcome, and purpose will reveal itself. Listen to that again, write it down, think about that. The action comes first. The clarity follows. So many people are paralyzed waiting to know, waiting to be sure, waiting for the vision to be clear enough before they risk moving toward it. And the painful irony is that the waiting is the very thing preventing the clarity from arriving. Here's the immediate application, and it's simply enough to do today. You don't need to know the 5-year plan. You just need to know your next 5 steps. You don't need to know where you'll be in 10 years. All you need to know is what you're going to do next. Today, whatever it is, whether it's a phone call, an application, a conversation, an hour spent doing the thing instead of thinking about the thing, the clarity you're waiting for is hiding inside the action you keep postponing. Stop waiting to know. Start doing to find out. Mindset 5. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. This one changed how I designed every aspect of my daily life. And it is the mindset that I think most people resist the hardest because accepting it means accepting something deeply uncomfortable. Your willpower is not the problem. Your environment is. Let me say that again, because it runs counter to everything productivity culture tells you. Your willpower is not the problem. Your environment is. The psychologist James Clear, building on decades of behavioral science, articulated something in Atomic Habits that has now been validated across hundreds of studies. Human behavior is far less driven by conscious intention than we believe, and far more driven by environmental cues. What we see, what's accessible, what's around us, what the people around us do. These are the primary drivers of behavior, not goals, not motivation, not discipline. The person who wants to eat better but keeps their kitchen full of food that undermines that goal is not going to succeed through willpower. The person who wants to read more but keeps their phone on their bedside table instead of a book is not going to succeed through discipline. The person who wants to grow but surrounds themselves exclusively with people who are comfortable with stagnation is not going to succeed through intention. This is not pessimism. This is power. Because if the environment is the primary driver of behavior, then designing your environment is the most powerful thing you can do for your goals. More powerful than motivation, more powerful than a vision board, more powerful than any amount of willpower. The ancient Indian concept of Sangha understood this completely. Sangha or satsang literally means the company of truth. This was the practice of deliberately surrounding yourself with people whose presence pulled you toward your highest self. Not just people you liked, people who by virtue of who they were and how they lived, made it easier for you to be who you were trying to become. The tradition understood that humans are profoundly, inevitably influenced by their environment, especially their social environment. And rather than fighting that influence through discipline, the wisdom was to design the environment so that the influence worked for you rather than against you. Research by social psychologist Nicholas Christakis at Yale confirmed this at scale. In a landmark study tracking thousands of people over decades, he found that behaviors, including happiness, obesity, smoking, and even loneliness, spread through social networks like contagion. You're not just influenced by your friends. You are influenced by your friends' friends' friends. 3 degrees of separation. The environment is that powerful. Here's the immediate application. You don't have to quit on all your friends. 3 questions to ask about your current environment. First, does your physical space make your most important behaviors easier or harder? If you want to meditate, is there a clear, quiet space that invites it? If you want to create, is your workspace organized around creation? Or is everything arranged around distraction? Second, does your social environment, the 5 people you spend the most time with, make you more or less likely to become who you're trying to be? Not whether you love them, whether their orbit is pulling you forward or holding you in place. Third, what is the single easiest change you could make to your environment today, right now, that would make your most important goal more likely? Not a dramatic thing, the smallest possible environmental adjustment that removes friction between you and who you're trying to become. You don't rise to your goals. As James Clear says, you fall to your environment. So build an environment worth falling to. Mindset 6. The most dangerous story you tell is the one about yourself. Every person walking the planet is a narrator of their own life. And like all narrators, we're unreliable. We edit, we emphasize certain chapters and minimize others. We assign causation where there's only correlation. We cast ourselves in roles, sometimes the hero, sometimes the victim, always the protagonist, and we mistake those roles for truth. The story you tell about yourself is the most powerful force in your life. more powerful than your circumstances, more powerful than your talent, more powerful than your opportunities. Because the story decides which opportunities you see, which risks you take, which relationships you believe you deserve, and which version of your future you allow yourself to move forward. The psychologist Dan McAdams at Northwestern University has spent his career studying what he calls narrative identity, the story each person constructs about who they are and how they came to be that way. And his research has found something both obvious and profound. The content of your self-narrative predicts your psychological well-being, your resilience, and your capacity for growth more reliably than almost any other variable. Not what happened to you, how you story what happened to you. Two people can go through almost identical experiences, the difficult childhood, the professional failure, the painful relationship, and construct completely different narratives from the same raw material. One person stories it as evidence of their damage, the other stories it as the origin of their depth. The experiences were similar. The narrators made different choices. McAdams identified what he called the redemption narrative, a story structure where difficult chapters are told as leading to growth, insight, or strength. He found that people who naturally organize their self-narratives around redemption are significantly more psychologically healthy, more generative, and more resilient than those who organize around contamination, where a good thing was ruined, where a hopeful beginning led to a bad end. The difference is not in what happened. The difference is in how it is told. Here's what I want you to do with this immediately. Think of the story you most consistently tell about yourself. The one that comes up in therapy, or with close friends, or at 3 a.m. when you're being most honest. The one that explains why things are the way they are. Why you are the way you are. Now ask, is this the only story the evidence supports? Or is it one story, one edit, one emphasis of many that could be constructed from the same facts? What would the story look like if you're telling it as evidence of your strength rather than your damage? As evidence of your wisdom rather than your wounds? As a chapter rather than a conclusion? You are the narrator. The raw material's fixed. The narration is yours. This isn't toxic positivity. Choose a story that is honest, that gives you somewhere to go. Mindset 7, love is not a feeling, it is a daily decision. A student once asked a teacher, "What's the difference between I like you and I love you?" The teacher replied, "When you like a flower, you simply pluck it. But when you love a flower, you water it every day." Love is a daily act, a daily decision, not just a feeling. I've saved this one for last deliberately because I think it is the most important, and I think it is the most misunderstood, and I think getting it wrong is responsible for more human suffering than almost anything else I could name. Here's the story our culture tells us about love. Love is a feeling that arrives, a lightning bolt, a chemistry, a sense of recognition. There you are. That happens to you rather than being made by you. And when the feeling is there, the relationship works. And when the feeling fades, which it inevitably does, because all feelings are temporary, the relationship is over, because the love is gone. This story is everywhere. In every rom-com, in every love song, in every dating app, designed around the initial spark. It is so pervasive that most people have never questioned it. The psychologist Robert Sternberg at Yale developed what he called the triangular theory of love, a framework that identifies 3 components of genuine, durable love: passion, intimacy, and commitment. And his research found that of the 3, passion, the feeling, the spark, the chemistry, has the shortest lifespan. It peaks early, often within months of a relationship beginning, and it declines predictably regardless of how compatible, how suited, or how deeply in love 2 people genuinely are. This is not a bug. This is biology. The neurochemicals responsible for the early intensity of romantic love, dopamine, norepinephrine, are designed to initiate bonding, not maintain it. They're a starter motor, not an engine. The relationships that last, the ones that deepen rather than erode, are built on what remains after the starter motor quiets. And what remains is not a feeling. It is a series of daily, often mundane, often imperfect choices. The choice to be curious about this person rather than certain about them. The choice to repair the rupture rather than catalog it. The choice to see them fully, not just the version you fell for, but the complex, contradictory, sometimes maddening whole person in front of you, and choose them anyway. The difference between a relationship that survives and a relationship that dies is not the absence of conflict. It was the presence of what John Gottman calls bids for connection. The small, daily, often trivial attempts one person makes to reach toward the other. A joke, a question, a touch, a look. And the critical variable was whether those bids were met, turned toward, in Gottman's language, rather than turned away from. The relationships that lasted were not the ones with the most passion or the best compatibility scores or the fewest arguments. They were the ones where both people, most of the time, in the small moments that feel like they don't count, choose to turn toward each other. That is not a feeling, that is a practice. Here's the immediate application. Think of the most important relationship in your life right now and ask, what is the smallest, most available, most concrete bid for connection I could make toward this person today? Not a grand gesture, not a difficult conversation, the smallest genuine movement toward them. A text that says, I was thinking of you. A question that shows you've been paying attention. 5 minutes of eye contact without a phone in the room. The choice to be curious rather than reactive in the next disagreement. Love is a daily decision. Make it today. Here's what I know about mindsets. They don't change your life by being interesting. They change your life by being practiced, by being returned to again and again until they stop being ideas you agree with and start being the lens through which you automatically see. That process takes time, takes repetition, takes the courage to keep applying an idea even when the situation is hard, and the easier thing is to react from habit. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you'll share this with a friend, and I hope you'll choose a mindset to practice for the next 7 days. Remember, I'm forever in your corner, and I'm always rooting for you. If you enjoyed this conversation, you're going to love my episode with Arnold Schwarzenegger on how to make your visions a reality and how to stop having a limited mindset.
I never believed in plan B. If I start having a plan B, that means now that I'm saying, well, maybe this isn't working out.